Roll Tide, everybody, and welcome back to the Bama Tailgate Show. Alabama, Wisconsin, early morning affair at Bryant-Denny Stadium, the return trip for the Badgers as they take on the Crimson Tide. We appreciate you guys. Of course, the show's always presented by Yuengling Lager, America's oldest brewery. Our friend Cheryl Yuengling went to Alabama. Yeah, she's part of the company's ownership, America's oldest brew. She went to Alabama, so she puts a little bit of Crimson love in each one of those green bottles. And don't forget to try Flight, the lighter yet smooth and refreshing light Yuengling. So we appreciate that. Cheryl's going to be at the show coming up soon with her sisters. Her and her three sisters. There's 4 Yuengling girls. They run the company, and they're all coming to Bama, Oklahoma. So that'll be a lot of fun to see them. Talking about a lot of fun, it's great to talk to our friend Chris Lowe from On3. We talk to Chris Lowe each week here on the Tailgate Show. Good to see you, Chris. Bama, Wisconsin. Your thoughts on what to expect in this Big Ten versus SEC, almost challenge type game?
Yeah, I think Mick, what we saw last week against ULM. Now, clearly Wisconsin's more talented and deeper, but this just sets up to me as one of those games where Alabama's speed and athleticism and the fact that they're still licking their wounds from that first game against FSU. That they'll play that way, they'll play mad, they'll play angry. And I just haven't seen anything from Wisconsin that makes me think that they can keep up with Alabama. Now, they'll be physical. Luke Fickell's teams are always physical, and they're going to come at you. But this game, as it wears out, as the game goes on, I think you're going to see Bama's it's their depth, some of their playmakers at receiver, and they're just a better football team. They're more talented. I know we always say, wait a minute, didn't you guys say that going into the Florida State game? Well, that game was on the road. There was a lot of unknowns there. Florida State had a whole new team. This game's at home. You look at the way Kalen's teams have played at home versus the road, there's no comparison. They played much better football, seemingly much more inspired football, and have jumped out on teams. I mean, I go back to that Georgia game last year. And Georgia came back and made that anybody's game at the end. But you go back to the way that stadium was just jumping, and Alabama was lights out on offense there in the first half. I think you'll see something similar to that in this game. And trust me, Wisconsin, they don't have the chops to come back the way Georgia did if they get behind 2-3 touchdowns.
Hey, guys, Chris's appearance on the Tailgate Show is presented by Visit Sevierville and the Smoky Mountains. Smoky Mountain Harvest Fest is September 19th through October 31st. Which means creative fall displays throughout Sevierville and fall-themed events, as well as brilliant fall color in the trees. Peak leaf viewing is typically mid-October through mid-November. Visit sevierville.com/fall for more information. I'm curious myself, Chris. Got to be honest. I don't know what to expect. Bama's pass rush has been lacking. You lose one of your best guys in the interior to Michigan in the transfer portal. You get Tim Keenan hurt. Beeman's out for the year. And even with that dominant performance against ULM, I still felt like at times Bama still wasn't getting to the quarterback. I mean, they did some, but this offensive line today, even if Wisconsin center is out, he's questionable, Bama's going to have to get pressure on the quarterback. I don't even want to look past this game and talk about Georgia, really. I just want to see this defensive line get after it more, and do they even have the ability to get after it more? That's the question.
Yeah, I think we've all learned our lesson about not looking past anybody after what happened in week 1 with Alabama. Wisconsin's quarterback situation is pretty shaky too, and I think that's the other factor to consider in this game. I know Kane Womack talked this week about being able to, finish more plays. And I think that we all get caught up in sacks. And I get that who's had and what teams had how many sacks and how many sacks the front sevens had. See, I think it's more the way you affect the quarterback. Pressure him, get him to make quicker throws, bad decisions. To me, if you go back and watch the tape, and I'm no football coach, but as a defensive coach, I'm watching more. How many times in that game did we get to the quarterback? Did someone rush? Did someone get in his face? and that created a negative play. Granted, sacks are negative plays, and from a defensive standpoint, nothing changes the complexion of a drive when you sack the other team's quarterback. But what Bama needs to do more of, and I know this is something that's on Womack's plate, is they need to get in and affect the quarterback more negatively and get him to throw the ball or throw it to them or just make bad plays. And that's where you're right, the interior of that defensive line, and they need to find more finishers on the edge. We talked about that in the preseason. When I was there, I talked to Kane about that. They don't have on this team a Will Anderson. They don't have a Dallas Turner. Those guys who are just one-man wrecking machines coming off the edge. They're going to have to create that more. Guys are going to have to grow up. I know the Pierre kid was someone he liked a lot. The whole staff liked a lot coming into this season. Those guys are going to have to continue to develop and continue to be, and again, I use this word again, be finishers off the edge, and then get that push on the interior. We'll see, when Keenan gets back, I think he makes a big difference. I mean, that's no revelation. Everybody knows that. But I agree, that's the area of this defense where they've got to be better. They've got to be more consistent, got to be more physical, and they've got to be more disruptive right up the middle.
No doubt about it. Hanging out with our friend Chris Lowe as you guys watch or listen to the Bama Tailgate Show, whether it be on the Bama Tailgate YouTube channel or across Radio Land in the state of Alabama, getting you ready for Alabama and Wisconsin and a big matchup. Love these matchups, by the way. Love these matchups. And, Chris, I don't think teams should be penalized for playing these games. College football has always been criticized for the weak non-conference matchups, or even some conferences like the Big Ten. There's a lot of just weak teams that are in there. I feel like the SEC is very deep right now, maybe not as top-heavy as the Big Ten, but definitely in the SEC, you're talking about 8, eventually 9 games, and then if you're Alabama, you go play Florida State and Wisconsin. I really feel like college football needs to reward these games so we get more of them.
Absolutely, man. You're preaching to the choir. I've said this for several years now. I mean, take those neutral site games and toss them. I get it. The money is outstanding. You go play in Atlanta or Charlotte or Dallas or wherever. I understand why schools do it. I'm not naive. But the fabric of college football are these types of games. It's what we saw in week 1 from Bama. Go to Florida State. Now Wisconsin comes to Tuscaloosa. And Bama's one of the few teams out there, not the only team, but one of the few teams to go play 2 Power 4 teams on a campus and not have one of them be a neutral site game. So I think that is important. And I would hope, just as you said, that when they get around to picking the teams come selection time, if indeed Alabama is right there in the conversation, that you would get points more so than you're looking at somebody else's schedule. Maybe they got one fewer loss. But if you're willing to go play Power 4 non-conference games on campus, and granted this is on Bama's campus, I still think that should be worth something. And Bama has done a good job of that. And Greg Byrne, I know, I've talked to him about his belief that you should play. This was even before 9 conference games became a reality. But his belief was you should play 10 good games every year. And with going to 9 games in the SEC, Bama's always going to play that marquee non-conference game. They got Ohio State coming up here, back home and home here in a couple of years. Those are games that, as you said, that should never go away. And I would hope that this new metric in the playoff system that's been put in as far as selecting teams will indeed reward teams that go and do it. And the tricky thing, Mick, is sometimes when you schedule these games years ahead. I mean, I think that's the thing sometimes people lose sight of. And sometimes you schedule a game against a quote-unquote blue blood or a team that has been really good. Last year's a great example, Florida State. This year, nobody really expected Florida State to be what it looks like they are, and that's a really good football team. They were 2-10. But sometimes you can't help it. Wisconsin had that run where they were one of the Big Ten heavyweights. Well, they haven't been as good under Lake Fickle. So sometimes you schedule these games and it doesn't work out where teams are top 25 type teams, but still the willingness to go schedule these type of games, I think absolutely should be rewarded.
No doubt about it. Bama's got a bunch of tough conference games coming up, including Georgia for their SEC opener after an off week next week, and that'll be in Athens. So Georgia plays against Tennessee. That's a huge matchup in Knoxville, and Vegas is kind of giving us the vibe that they think Tennessee might win this football game. And a lot of Bama fans are going, you know what? It'd be nice to see Georgia just take care of Tennessee. We don't need them all stirred up when Bama comes to town.
Yeah, a lot of money obviously coming in on Tennessee. This, I think, is Josh Heupel's best chance to beat Georgia. They've yet to beat him. Georgia's on this series the last decade. They won 8 in a row. Kirby's only lost to 1 his first year to Tennessee. And the blueprint's been the same, Mick. They've just beaten Tennessee up physically. Haven't let them do anything or get into any kind of rhythm offensively. Tennessee hasn't been able to throw the football. Tennessee hasn't thrown a touchdown pass in this game in the last 3 years. Not a single one.
Wow.
I think 2 pass plays in the last 3 games over 20 yards that Tennessee's completed. So that tells you what Georgia has done to Tennessee. And they've sacked the quarterback, I think it's just 18 times in the last 4 games. So Tennessee's got to find a way to protect. They got to find a way to keep Georgia balanced or honest and be able to run the football just enough. But this does look to be, and this is not dissing this team at Georgia because I think they're going to be really good. This looks to be Tennessee's best chance. They're playing at home. The quarterback, Aguilar, has looked like he's more adept at running around and making some plays and throwing the ball down the field than Iamaleava ever was. And I don't think this Georgia team is as loaded on defense. But how could you be? When you look at the draft in 21 and 22 and 23, the number of defensive players that Georgia sent to the NFL was staggering. I don't know if they have that many guys on this team, at least not right now. I think they've got some coming. So when you add it all up, Tennessee's probably got their best chance to win this game under Josh Heupel. That's not saying they will, because Kirby in these type games on the road, and he's better than anybody in college football at getting his team to believe that everyone's sleeping on him. I mean, gosh, he did that when they won 29 in a row. Every game, well, nobody believes in us. You know, people are doubting us. Well, never mind, they've won 29 straight football games. So he's really good at that and getting his teams to buy into that. So we'll see how this goes. But, man, I agree with you. I think the worst scenario for Alabama here in a couple of weeks is for Georgia to lose this game and then Kirby have an extra week to prepare. That game's in at Sanford Stadium, where I don't think Kirby's lost a game there since Reagan was in office. It's been forever. And to get Bama in a night game, Georgia will play with its hair on fire. That crowd will be crazy. I think that's the worst. I'm not saying Bama wouldn't win, but to me, if you ask what's the worst scenario for Alabama, I think that's it, that Georgia lose this game, have an extra week to prepare. Now, Bama would too. Bama would have a week off as well. But Bama roll into Sanford Stadium at night game. Georgia's pissed off. Kirby's pissed off. That team ready to go. I mean, think about that. When's the last time Kirby's lost 2 straight games? You know, it just doesn't happen. So that to me is, you know, and I know we're looking ahead a little bit, in which we said we were going to do. Wisconsin rolling into to Bryant-Denny this week, but that's what we do, man. That's why we're not football coaches. We're on
that's right.
radio shows and TV shows talking about what we think might happen.
Hey, guys, show's brought to you by our friends at Pearl River Resort over there in Philadelphia, Mississippi. The Timeout Sports Lounge is a Vegas-style sports book. You can get there, hour and a half from Tuscaloosa, 2 and change from Birmingham as we hang out with Chris Lowe from ESPN. Chris, I feel like there's been a shift in college football because of NIL. A lot of the teams that were, you know, kind of like top tier, but at the bottom of the top tier have bought their way into being top tier programs, right? I put Michigan in that category. I put Notre Dame in that category. I put Penn State in that category. Not Ohio State as much because I know they were fringing and I know they went out and paid to get a team that won them a championship, but they've won in 2014. They were always knocking on the door. They were in the playoff. But I put Texas in there, all those years of Texas not being successful. And now all of a sudden, you know, they're at the pinnacle. Is there ever going to come a point where college football or the politicians figure out a way to make the money even, where we have kind of a level playing field? Because I just feel like the trend is is a bad trend. I mean, where you can basically buy your way into being an upper echelon program.
My feeling is there's got to be some type of happy medium, because there was a point where the Alabamas of the world, the Georgias of the world, they just stockpile talent. And you go watch Alabama practice, they'd have 9 defensive linemen working together. And Mick, you can tell the ones from the threes. And before transfer portal, before NIL, those guys hung around. I know that was Nick's big frustrations. He didn't feel like he had enough time to develop those guys because they go elsewhere. Once we got into the portal, transfer portal NIL era. And to your point, I think that's what's happened. You've seen more of those guys who could play that maybe weren't quite as good as a guy in front of them who was a first-round draft pick, and they've gone elsewhere. They've gone to some of these other teams. Look at what Lane Kiffin's done at Ole Miss, the way he's used the transfer portal. Now, that said, I still think Alabama and Georgia, and maybe they aren't paying the kind of cash that Oregon is or Texas is or Miami is, Ohio State, but they're still recruiting at a high level. They're still getting good transfers. You look at Georgia. Georgia went and got 2 receivers that were among the most highly coveted receivers in the portal this year, the Branch kid from USC and Noah Thomas from Texas A&M. Alabama has done that too. I don't think they win the SEC championship that year without Jameson Williams, who came from Ohio State, and yet they did. So are they paying cash, as our buddy Randy Moss used to say straight cash, the way some of the other schools are? No. How do we get to that point where it's completely even across, the entire landscape? I think it's probably collective bargaining, and some ADs are in favor of that. Some coaches have said that's where we're going, where it's a NFL model that the players have their representation. They negotiate what the figure is, and then each school gets the same. They divvy it up. Players are employees at that point. There's always going to be unintended consequences when things like that happen. You don't know what those are necessarily until you get a couple of years down the road. But I still think we're probably headed in that direction because right now the rev share is what it is. Each school gets $20.5 million. Most of your marquee football teams, Bama, Ohio State, Texas, are spending about $15 million of that on football. But then you got the other side of this. You got NIL, where collectives and people outside the program can put together deals.
Right.
Maybe your car dealership, maybe some company that's based, in your city can come up with whatever they want to. Now they've got to be quote unquote approved by the commission and by the clearinghouse to be fair market value. But you tell me what fair market value is. And you can't tell me that as much as people want to win in college football, it's always been like that. There's always been money paid under the table. That people are going to be cutting corners. And to think otherwise is being naive.
Yeah.
And I would say it happens probably everywhere. But, if you're not cheating, Mick, what's the old adage in the SEC?
You're not
cheating, you're not trying.
And unfortunately, that's definitely the old adage.
And that's everybody. I love how coaches and fans at schools point the finger at everybody else but themselves. We're not doing that. Well, look at what Georgia's doing. Look what Tennessee's doing. Or look what Alabama's doing. You go back over the last 25, 30 years, and some of the stories you hear about money being paid under the table, some of it's a bunch of BS, but there's some of it it's absolutely true. So it's not like this is just starting or a new phenomenon. It's been going on for a while. I do think, though, somehow, some way, we've got to get to a point in college football where it is a little bit more even across the board, and everyone's playing by quote unquote the same rules. And I think the only way to get there, and I don't feel sorry for schools that feel like they have started, other schools are starting to outspend them now, be it Georgia, be it Alabama, be it anybody else. But the only way we get to that point, I think, is to get to a model that's essentially collective bargaining.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. Yeah, a lot of pressure on Kalen DeBoer and his Alabama team to play, again, Alabama football against Wisconsin. We've talked about that and what the expectations are, and a very winnable game for Alabama, but they got to go out there and bring the intensity that they had last week. And then you look around the country, you look around the conference even, And there's a lot of great teams. I mean, like, you know, Oklahoma's a much, much improved team. They're going to be coming to Tuscaloosa this year. One team that Alabama won't play is Texas A&M, but they're playing Notre Dame. And I love that matchup. Bama and Notre Dame ought to play, you know, I mean, in Tuscaloosa and South Bend. I think all of us would love to see that. But your thoughts on Notre Dame and Texas A&M, two ranked teams?
Yeah, and going back to something you said a minute ago about a lot of really good teams, maybe the balance being better across college football, that to me is a direct result of the transfer portal. I mean, you look at Florida State, how many new players did they bring in that made a difference? I was at LSU Clemson the first week, Mick. That LSU defense completely revamped. They brought in pass rushers. They brought in guys on the back end. Now, Harold Perkins being healthy helps a lot too. But you can plug holes and bring in key acquisitions and do that quicker and improve quicker than you ever used to under the old system. I think A&M is another school that has been able to bring in some new faces. Their offensive line and the way they can be physical, I think is they to me up front offensively are as physical as any team in the league. They're going to run the ball. They're going to pound you. You know, Marcel Reed, I think, is a little bit of the X factor. You know, how much more effective is he throwing the football? We know he can run and escape and make things happen. Notre Dame, this is not new territory for them, right? Mm-hmm. They lost to Northern Illinois last year at home in the second game and came back and played for the national championship. So, they got their work cut out, but Marcus Freeman has shown that he can keep together a locker room, that they don't let one blemish or one bad loss keep them down. But I'm with you, man. I love these games. I love when schools in the SEC go and play in Notre Dame. They're campus games. And with Notre Dame being independent, you know, they've got some flexibility. I hope we see more of these. But no, the first 3 weeks of the season, and I understand we're getting some of the conference games right now, but the more of these types of games we see, the better off the sport is.
Yeah, no doubt. One coach that seems to be on the hot seat a lot is Billy Napier. Lost to South Florida, which I don't look at it as that big of an upset. South Florida destroyed Boise State. They play Miami this week. But Florida expects to win that game. I watched it. The house was rocking down there. Is he on the hot seat? And who are some of the other coaches around the SEC right now that have to win or could be out?
Yeah, let's start with Alex Golesh at USF. I mean, there's a guy who is going to be on everybody's short list after this season. He's done a really good job. He's an offensive guy. He's going to have a lot of opportunities. And he's got a football team, you're right, in South Florida. I bet they give Miami everything they want. You know, this weekend. He's a good coach. He's been in the SEC. So what was I wasn't shocked. I'm like you. I wasn't shocked that Florida lost that football game. I thought they would be better. I certainly thought they would not be that anemic offensively. But I knew South Florida, after watching their game against Boise State, would be a tough out. Now, what that does for Billy is it puts him in a hole that they're going to have to climb out of. They sort of climbed out of it last year and played really good football down the stretch. But their schedule, Mick, to me, the rest of the way is even harder than it was last year. When you look at who all they've got to play, it's just a gauntlet. And what's it going to take for Billy to hang around? I don't know. I don't know that they have it in them to be able to win 8 or 9 games again. It just does not look realistic. And at this juncture in his career, you know, if they throw a 75 or a 6-6 out there, I don't think he survives. You know, the difference this year is that AD Scott Strickland probably not tied as closely to Billy as he was last year because he got a new contract, a brand new contract.
Right.
I think he's sort of, you know, feeling the good part of Florida winning a championship in basketball. That certainly doesn't hurt. So,
yeah.
Whereas last year I felt like if they had to make a move on Billy, that Scott might have been the first to go. I don't know if they would have let him hire the next guy. I don't feel that way this time, which may make it easier for Florida to cut Billy Napier loose. I'm not ready to mail it in on him because he showed a lot of strength. I was impressed with the way he held his locker room together last year. But doing that 2 years in a row in that league against that schedule, the odds are against him.
Yeah, wow. I kind of feel like with Napier, like the program was in such bad shape that I feel like they're moving in the right direction. I think he's a good coach, but we're so impatient, and
Yeah.
it's not like he took over Alabama and had the cupboard stacked. But at the same time, you see what Florida State did. They go out and they get two great coordinators and they go out and rebuild their entire team. And, and they're a great team again. I mean, it seems like maybe I'm wrong. I didn't think they were that good, but then, looking back at it and looking what they did and looking what Alabama did, you're going, man, maybe they're going to be a really tough out in the ACC. Also, I thought it was impressive that Mississippi State had a huge win. Watch that one. They beat Arizona State. Now, they don't have Scattaboo, but it was still like thinking about like Vanderbilt beating Virginia Tech and then Mississippi State beating Arizona State. Like the bottom teams in the league could beat you, and I think that's what makes the SEC so balanced, so good.
Yeah, one of the things I think that frustrates Florida fans about Napier is he says he's going to continue to call his own plays. He didn't bring anybody else in. And you look around college football, and coaches are doing that more than ever when they struggle on one side of the ball. Oklahoma brings in Arbuckle. You look 2 years ago, LSU brought in Blake Baker. Clemson brings in Tom Allen. And schools are going out and spending a lot of money to bring in coordinators like that. You mentioned Mississippi State. And I spent some time with Jeff Levy a few weeks ago. And one of the things that stuck out to me is he brings in two guys on defense to be analysts who've been head coaches, Dreiling at Utah State, and then Mike McIntyre, who's been a head coach at a couple of different places, guys who are veterans, to sort of give him a different way to look at things. Levy's an offensive guy, and yet he brings in guys like that on his staff to help. That was a really, really difficult replacement for Jeff Levy, because you look at that community and that program, of everything they've been through since Mike died suddenly. They're at the end of the 2022 season. They bring in Zach Arnett. They fire him before the season's over. He just wasn't ready to be a head coach. And they could get Jeff Levy. They go 2-10 last year. He's got 65 new players on this team. They look a lot closer, having been there and watched them practice. And seeing that game the other night, they look a lot closer to being an SEC team. They're a little bit deeper. They're better up front. Oh, they lost Will Whitson, who had a big game against Arizona State. He lost him to the season. That's the type of injury that they're still not ready, I think, to overcome because of their lack of depth compared to everybody else. But I've said this last year. We talked about it in the preseason. The SEC ain't your granddaddy's SEC anymore, even your daddy's SEC. There are more teams that can beat you on any Saturday than I can remember really over the last decade. You go back to 14 or 15, all the way through Georgia's back-to-back national titles. Mick, there was a big gap. I know some of the people in the SEC didn't want to admit this, certainly not in the league office, but it was Bama, Georgia, Bama, LSU in 19. Then there was a pretty wide margin. You didn't see a lot of these major upsets. Think about what we've seen so far last year and this year. I think we're going to see more of that. You've got Vandy under Clark Lee, who's legit. Look at what Beamer's done at South Carolina and elevated that program. Lane at Ole Miss. I think Arkansas is probably better than they're giving credit for. I mean, heck, they beat Tennessee last year. Oklahoma, much, much improved. And they went out in the portal and they brought in everybody. They needed to. They filled key spots. John Mateer, we talked about Arbuckle, offensive coordinator. Brent's calling his own plays on defense. There's just much – balance is probably a word that's overused. There's just going to be more carnage than we're used to seeing in the SEC. There's going to be teams that we don't see beating another team that do, like a Vandy beating Alabama last year. I'm intrigued by Vandy, South Carolina this week. Now, that game's in Columbia. The Gamecocks are really difficult to beat there. But I'm telling you, I spent some time with Clark and that program this spring in Nashville. Those guys believe. They got a quarterback who's his bravado, whatever you want to call it, filters down to the rest of that team, and he's created some depth there that Vandy hasn't had. So across the board, as I look at the league, and let's be honest, when LSU is an elite football team and they're elite on defense, and I think they have a chance to be that this year, then it really throws the league into just a big hodgepodge of teams that can beat anybody on any Saturday.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Chris, always great to see you. Check out Chris's work at On3. And our show is brought to you by Pearl River Resort over there in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Let's hear from Jay Cochran. Thanks for hanging. Like, subscribe, and thumbs up, guys.
I may not suit up on Saturdays anymore, but I'm still in the game.
Let's roll.
In here, I call the plays, make adjustments, and lay it on the line. Want to feel that fire, that rush? Then you've got to get in the game. I used to say it in the tunnel, and I still say it now. Let's roll.
Let's roll.
We're presented by Bod Coach, and you can tell I'm slimming up over here, and it's because of Bod Coach. This is absolutely amazing. It's your personal trainer that is with you 24/7. So when I go to hotels or when I'm on the road, I type in, "Hey, look, I got equipment. This is what I have," and it'll make a workout specifically for me, what I want, what exercises I want. When I'm at home or I'm at a hotel and there's no way I can get to the gym, it'll say, "Hey, this is what I want to work on today," and it sends you personalized workout plans. It's really awesome. And they contacted me a few weeks ago to be a spokesman. I said, "Well, I want to try this." Bod Coach is fantastic. Like, I use it all the time. I mean, and if I'm telling you, man, like, it makes working out when you are on the go like me so much better. Just because I don't always know I didn't play football at Alabama. I didn't have Scott Cochran yelling, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and telling me what workouts to do. So anyway, I'm going to put in the body on the YouTube all about Bod Coach. Get you guys signed up there, but tell them you heard it on Bama Tailgate.
When you head to the Smoky Mountains, it's only natural to visit Sevierville.
Even we had to check it out.
And we've been here our whole lives.
Experience the adventure of a lifetime.
I'm king of the world.
Even you can get a bird's eye view of the Smokies.
You're going down, Billy. Whoa.
Your Smokies start here.